Hello, everyone, and welcome to the new episode of Entrepreneurship Lab. This is your host, Nevena Bajalac, welcoming you once again to the podcast where we help you grow and scale your business. And as always, we bring you experts in different topics. We talk about different area in business to help you grow and scale. And today we're going to talk about a very interesting topic that we haven't talked about before, and that's trust and building trust with your customers, with your clients. And who better to talk about that than Darryl Stickel? And Darryl is recognized as one of the world's leading thinkers on trust by Trust Across America and Trust Across around the world. And he has spoken in institutions as Harvard, NYU, Notre Dame, and so on. And his methodology is very unique on ability how to build trust, especially if you're a leader or entrepreneur. So, Daryl, welcome to the show, and I'm very excited to have you today here.
I'm really grateful to be here, Navina. Thank you to you and your listeners.
So, tell us a little bit more why trust? Like, what led you to really start with this topic, to become an expert on this topic? How did your journey started?
So I grew up in a small town in northern British Columbia, Canada, and it was fairly remote and isolated and harsh winters. And so there was this sense that we had to pull together. I grew up with this belief that if you could help people, you should. And so that started, and then I had a series of unfortunate, challenging episodes in my life that provoked an even deeper sense of empathy. Um, to the point where, when I was going to university, I would be sitting on a bus and strangers would sit down next to me and say, I'm really having a hard time. And so I wanted to understand what it was that was making people feel so comfortable with me because I saw that it wasn't happening with other folks. And so I worked with troubled teens, families in crisis, and worked on crisis lines and did an undergraduate degree in psychology and then a master's in public administration. Um, and so there's this kind of iterative learning and growing and developing process that went on. And when I was working for the federal government in native land claims here in Canada, they would ask me these sort of deep philosophical questions like, what is self-government? Or what will the province look like 50 years after claims are settled? The last question they asked me was, how do we convince a group of people who shafted for over 100 years they should trust us? And I thought, wow, that is such a good question because it gets to these long-term disputes. And so I went to Duke and wrote my doctoral thesis on building trust in hostile environments. And I had the good fortune of having a couple of the world's leading experts on trust on my committee. And afterwards, they sat me down and they said, when you first came to us, we had a conversation with each other and we said, too big, too complicated. He never solves it. We'll give him 6 months. He'll come crawling back. We'll let him chisel off a little piece of this, and that'll be his thesis. And they said, 6 months in, you were so far beyond us, we couldn't help anymore. All we could do is sit and watch. And we think you've solved it. And so I went to a big consulting firm, McKinsey and Company, and worked there for a couple of years, um, getting a chance to actually apply the concepts that I had theories about. And again, learning and growing and developing. Um, And then I was injured in a car accident on the way to a client site and just couldn't work those kinds of hours anymore. So started my own little company called Trust Unlimited, and I've devoted my career to helping people better understand what trust is, how it works, and most importantly, how to build it.
Yeah, and look how life led you. You're still serving your purpose. You're still sharing your mission. And sometimes we imagine we are going on different direction, but actually life forces to go in another way. And I mean, what better way than now helping so many people through
Yeah.
everything you're doing.
Yeah. I think it was Kierkegaard who said that life makes sense in reverse. And so
Exactly.
it almost feels intentional, right? when you see the path, but it didn't feel that way at the time, that's for sure.
I'm sure it didn't. I'm sure it didn't, Daryl. So I want to ask you, how do you define trust? We talk about trust so much. How do we
Right.
actually define it? And there is of course trust in relationship, trust with your friendship, and then trust in business, your customer trust your product or your service. But what is actually trust? What are the words that we can put for people to maybe paint a picture of what is trust and help them build it easier?
Yeah, so that's a great question. It's good for us to try to clarify this fuzzy concept. And so trust is the willingness to make yourself vulnerable when you can't completely predict how someone else is going to behave. And so if we think about it, there's elements of uncertainty and vulnerability definition. And for me, trust is a combination. When we decide to trust people, we ask ourselves two fundamental questions. How likely am I to be harmed, which is perceived uncertainty? If I'm harmed, how bad is it going to hurt, which is perceived vulnerability? And if we think about your audience, entrepreneurs ask people to trust them often. Often they're providing a new product or service. They're building an organization from the ground up. They need the trust of those they lead and their colleagues, the ones that are working with them. I've heard some of your guests talk about how important it is to have good people around you. Um, and so people make themselves vulnerable by devoting their time and energy to your enterprise. You need trust of funders. You need trust of suppliers. You need trust of distributors. You need to use trust to build marketing, to get word of mouth out. You need to build trust with your customers. And if we think about that term, make yourself vulnerable. Well, customers make themselves vulnerable when they try our products for the first time. If they actually tell people about our product and advocate on our behalf, give referrals, that's a deeper trust level. And, when we want to grow and evolve and move into new markets, again, we're trying to convince people to take a chance on us, to make themselves vulnerable to us. And so trust is incredibly important for entrepreneurs.
Yeah, and I love how you put it, and something, yes, like people trust you with your product and service, and then if they're referring you, they trust you gonna deliver the same quality service to their friends, family, or the product will work for them as well. And that's like, putting yourself, like you said, being even more vulnerable because now you are risking your own reputation by recommending someone else's
Yeah,
product or service, and that's so powerful. I never thought about it that way, and now I'm realizing, wow, this is really powerful. When somebody is referring us, it's they are putting themselves to be more vulnerable.
exactly. I might try your service or product, and the only risk I take is the money I lose for trying it and the inconvenience. But if I refer you to somebody else, someone that I care about, and then something goes wrong, I put my own reputation and relationships at risk. And
Yeah,
so a lot of times financial services folks will ask me, how do I get referrals? And I'll say to them, it's one thing for me to let you play with my money. It's an even deeper risk for me to let you play with somebody else's money that I care about.
yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah,
So, when we talk now about trust, and I love that you mentioned also marketing, right? Marketing is kind of being developed to build that trust faster. So if you can take example, I mean, you work in McKinsey and you worked in so many companies. So if you can take example of some companies that are building trust in a very good way, and using marketing in a good way, and maybe some we don't even have to name them, but something they're doing that actually not so good. Like, can you give some examples that are maybe familiar to everyone, and how would you discuss like yes, discuss building trust through their marketing
right.
campaign.
So for me, like I said, trust is a combination of uncertainty and vulnerability. And I'm going to unpack it a little bit, and then we'll talk about how marketing has an impact. So it's uncertainty times vulnerability gives us a level of perceived risk. And we each have a threshold of risk that we can tolerate. And so if we go beyond that threshold, we don't trust. If we're beneath it, then we do. And so that means that if uncertainty is really high, like early in the relationship, then the vulnerability we can tolerate is really small. And as that relationship gets deeper, the uncertainty shrinks, the range of vulnerability we can tolerate starts to grow. And in our deepest relationships, we have just a sliver of uncertainty and this huge range of vulnerability we can tolerate. And so, what marketing does is it attempts to reduce our uncertainty. And some companies are better at this than others. Um, we think about some companies who try to reduce our vulnerability, right? To get us to try that first time. So, money back guarantees, try before you buy. The ice cream store that lets you taste the different flavors before you get a full cup. And so they're reducing your vulnerability, right? You can try rum raisin and then realize I don't like rum or raisin. Thank God I didn't buy a whole cone. And so a lot of times, if we have a structural response, Land's End was a clothing manufacturer that used to do this, where they said you can return anything, anytime for any reason. So they were trying to reduce your vulnerability to get you to buy their clothes once with the confidence that you would like them so much that you'd come back. And so sometimes if we can get that first early attempt for someone so that they start to build that relationship with us so that the uncertainty starts to go down. Because really, when we're talking about building trust, we're talking about how do we reduce uncertainty? Where does it come from? How do we reduce it? And how do we take steps to manage somebody else's vulnerability? And so if we think about where uncertainty comes from, it comes from us as individuals or as organizations, and it comes from the context we're embedded in. So I talk about levers that we can pull to build trust. And in my model, there are 10 of them. And so I'll talk about four of them that lie
Yeah.
within uncertainty, right? So uncertainty comes from me. Well, the way that I make you feel like I'm more trustworthy is to show you benevolence, integrity, and ability. Benevolence is a belief you've got my best interest at heart and that you'll act in my best interest. Integrity is, do I follow through on my commitments? And do my actions line up with my values? And abilities, do I have the competence to do what I say I'm going to do? And then context is the rest. And that's the sort of formal and informal mechanisms of social control, how I'm constrained. And so I can take steps to reduce your uncertainty by showing you that I have your best interest at heart, or by showing you that I'm walking the talk, by demonstrating integrity, or by showing you that I've got the ability to do what I say I'm going to do. Now, we all have the ability to build trust, but so many people have a lever that they pull. And usually it's the ability lever. I have these many credentials, this much experience, this background. If we want to be a bit better at building trust, we need to have multiple levers, right? And so those who are really gifted have multiple levers and they know when to pull which one. So if I'm trying to build trust with you and you're convinced that I have ability and I just keep pulling the ability lever, I'm not making any progress. I need to actually show you benevolence and integrity or explain my context to reduce your uncertainty to make you more comfortable. And so often organizations, I worked with a telecom organization who here in Canada who had a slogan, the future's friendly. And I said, well, what kind of promises are you making with that slogan? What do your clients expect? What does it even mean? And I had a group of senior executives sitting in the room. They all looked at each other and said, well, we're actually not quite sure. It's something that marketing came up with. And I said, yeah, because the cynic in me says the future's friendly. It's the present you need to worry about. And so when we're engaged in marketing, we have to be very aware of the promises that we're making because clients, customers, colleagues, suppliers, distributors, funders will all get nervous if we start breaking our promises.
Yeah, and I love that. I love how you explained it in so much detail, and I'm sure we can go into so much depth. Of course, you got your PhD on the topic of trust, but we only have 30 minutes today, and trying to simplify years of your studies and research into something practical that people can use. So most of the listeners are startups, medium-sized businesses, entrepreneurs. If they have a product or a service and they say, I'm not sure, I'm not selling enough, or people have some objections. There is always a part of trust that people do not trust that's the right product for them, that's going to work for them, the service. So, are there any tips of what they can do practically to build that trust? Is it, part of the marketing? Is it part of the conversations they're having with the prospect? How they can, get eventually more sales, use the aspect of trust that's so important to, I don't like to
Yeah.
use word persuade, but you understand me, like to get people to become their clients and to really believe in the product and service and believe it's going to work for them.
So if people trust us at a certain level, they'll actually talk to us, right? So often trust gets treated like it's a dichotomous variable, like it's either present or absent. And the reality is we trust some people more than others. At low levels of trust, people will actually have a conversation with us and they'll tell us why they're not buying or why they think other people aren't buying our products. And I talked about the four levers. So many people that are listening right now will be like the leaders that I coach who say, I do all those things. And I got to tell you, Navina, it doesn't matter if I think I'm doing those things. It matters if you think I'm doing those things. And so it matters if the customers think we have their best interest at heart, if the customers think we're following through, if the customers think we're exceptional. And so we have to have a conversation. And at low levels of trust, we need to ask our customers, how do I help you be successful? What commitments do you think I'm making? What promises do you think I'm making? Am I following through on those with my services and my goods? What would excellence look like for this kind of product or to meet your needs?
Yeah.
And then we need to respond in a way that shows we've heard them. And so there needs to be a conversation. And I'll give your listeners a conversation to show how to pull the benevolence lever. Um, because benevolence is really just having somebody's back. It's having their best interest at heart. So tomorrow, when you're talking to a customer or one of your stakeholders, say to them, I heard this guy, Darryl, he was talking about trust. He said that having somebody's best interest at heart was really important. That's one of the levers you could pull. And I think I do that, but it doesn't always land that way. Have you ever experienced that? And the other person's going to go, oh God, yes. 99 times out of 100, we've experienced this or seen it. So get curious about that. What happened? How did you get misunderstood? And then narrow the funnel and say, has someone ever really had your back? Well, what did they do? How did it look? How did it feel? Because now they're giving us hints and we're priming them to think about their best interests and what that looks like. And then narrow the funnel further and say, what is success for you? How do I help you get there? What would it look like if I had your best interest at heart? What would it look like if I was benevolent to you? And now we're creating a moment for transparency where the next time you're engaged with that person, you get the opportunity to say, you remember when you told me this is what really mattered to you? This is me following through on that. This is me trying to help you. Because we interpret the world through stories.
Yeah.
And if we're not involved in helping people create that story, there's a chance for misunderstandings.
Yeah. I love that. And it's really, you explained it in such a good way that we can understand. And you gave us the whole dialogue for conversation, basically, where we, can openly, where people can feel free to give us that kind of feedback. And I love that because the person will, I always say that also, like in the sales, any kind of sales call, discovery calls, if you ask the right question, people will tell you exactly, like they will tell you what makes them, what they're not sure about, why they're objecting with objections they're having, and why they're not trusting. So we just have to use, like you just gave us such a good material, use those questions to understand what our prospects want. And even if we don't sign up that prospect, we will know for the next one and we can shape. And that's like the learning experience where we can get. But I'm very curious to know, what are the mistakes? Like, what are some do not do when you're speaking with prospects because you're going to lose their trust? Like, what is something you see and you're like, oh my God, like, do not do that. You're going to completely lose the trust of the person. Are there any very powerful things that people are making
S-
mistakes?
Yeah, so often, and there's a temptation for this with entrepreneurs because everything's a scramble. We're trying to get money in the door. People will have this tendency to think short term versus long term, right? If I can just get this customer to buy this thing, then I win. And if you want to be successful longer term, you actually need to build strong relationships with your customers. You need to not trick them into buying your products, but you need to make sure that there's a good alignment between what their needs are and what you're providing. And so often people will make grandiose statements about things. Um, snake oil salesman did well in a town, but then had to not come back to it. And so it's a very intentional decision about what kind of business you want to be in.
Yeah.
Um, we have a tendency to overpromise,
Mm.
and especially when things are going wrong.
Yeah.
Um, and so the world's a turbulent place. If you want repeat customers, if you want referrals, if you want to grow your business in a way that's sustainable, then be careful about what you promise, what your commitments are. Um,
So
some
true, yes.
folks, yeah, and sometimes we see misalignments between sales and marketing and the rest of the organization, where sales and marketing are being incentivized to just get people through the door, and they're making promises and commitments that the organization can't keep up with. And so we can see a misalignment there where our incentive structures are pushing people to act in ways that aren't best for the long-term health of the company.
Yeah, so it's so true and so common in today's world where, people are sometimes just measuring success by more revenue and getting more people through the door, like you explained. And I love something that you said because I also, when I'm consulting and coaching and myself, I understood and I always give my personal example that building relationship is so much more powerful than getting a person to enroll because just because someone didn't sign up today or bought your product today doesn't mean they're not going to buy in the future, right? And if
Right.
you're like just pushy and showing that you want that sale now, even if it's not the right timing for them or they don't need it right now, to me it's so like you will lose in the long term. But when you just care about, presenting what your product or service is doing, building that relationship and sharing the value and the message of what you can do to other people, not necessarily for that person, but even for somebody they know. Later on,
Yeah.
those people, when they need it, they come back. So it happens to me so many times. I have clients that come back, they saw me or they've been to my events 2, 3 years ago, and they're coming as my clients because they were building trust back then. And it was never an intention of you signing up now. It was the intention, this is what I do, this is what I can help you with if you need that kind of help. And just being present and being there so people know, of course, about your service and what you can do for them, but not with intention, oh, you have to sign up this month or, after this event or whatever, ever we met. And that's something for me that's so important because that long-term relationship, there is, this lifetime value, right, of a customer where customer, it's not
Right.
just at one time, but through the whole lifetime how much they're buying from you again, how many other people they brought you. So, and this is the part that I see so many entrepreneurs are actually missing.
Yeah, I mean, imagine how powerful it would be as a customer if I came to you and I said, "This is what I'm looking for," and you were
Yeah,
able to say to me, "That's not quite what I do.
yeah,
I do the following, which is a piece of what you're looking for, but I think there may be a better solutions for you, and here's what I'm aware of."
yeah,
And you actually gave them advice that was in their best interest, not yours.
yeah.
How
It's
powerful is that?
powerful, yeah, exactly. And it removes that kind of fear or like some kind of ego or a fear to send a customer to another person or give them better solution. And immediately, like it was so powerful just you saying that sentence that builds the trust, like, hey, I'm trusting this person. He's not over promising. He can help me in this area and I want to work with him in this area. And
Yeah.
that's really, really, yeah, really powerful.
I've worked with clients. I worked with a mutual fund company where I told them exactly that. I said, show your clients what you offer, but be honest with them about, you know what, these are the subset of products that we offer, and some of them are great for your needs. And for others, there's a different fund that would work for you.
Yeah,
And they built such strong relationships
yeah.
that those customers started saying, "Yeah, I'm not going to go to anyone else. You're my guy."
I
Um,
love that.
yeah, and I worked with the mutual fund company for 18 months, and afterwards they hired a professional survey firm, found out that trust was the primary driver of the sales decision. And they generated 75 cents out of every new dollar that came into the industry for a 2-year period because they were so much more trusted than any of their competitors.
Yeah, exactly. Trust is such a big like I would even say the biggest part in getting the sales and I hope really your message will go through and you're gonna share it to so many more people because they're gonna benefit through it, Daryl. And I would like to wrap up the episode by asking you a final advice or if there is anything that you wish you knew a bit earlier, found out earlier in your research that could help you and it was aha moment for you in your career and doing this, this specific niche and being expert in trust, what it would be.
So that's a great question. Um, it's been a 25-year journey for me.
Yeah.
Um, and I've been learning the whole time, which has been just an amazing experience. And I started out kind of really learning about trust itself. And then I was still learning that, but I started to learn how to explain it to people a little better. And then as it evolved, I really wanted people to not just understand it, but to apply it. And
Yeah.
so that was the next learning journey, right? Was getting people to a place where they could actually figure out how to pull the levers, figure out how to build stronger relationships. So I get them to practice and apply these things. And I think the thing that I have learned, because people always ask me, how do I start? If I'm in a relationship or if I'm trying to build a stronger relationship, how do I start? And it starts with just a little bit of vulnerability, right? Make myself a little bit vulnerable first. And then that triggers an instinct in other folks to respond in kind, right? A big word called reciprocity. And that combined with a little bit of benevolence, a little bit of best interest at heart, is a powerful way to kickstart a positive cycle. And I came to realize that when I was talking about helping men. I'm working with a program where we're trying to help us, an aspiring men's program, trying to help young men thrive. And people said, how do we get young men to ask for help? And I said, we ask them for help first. And so that little bit of vulnerability triggers a positive response and not too much, right? Share, don't scare. but just a hint of, okay, if I'm an entrepreneur, asking my clients, I want to be successful. I want to be, you know, uh, part of your success story. But I can't do that without having you in the conversation. I need your help to figure out how to be better at this. We need your help to be successful for your life and our community. I actually need information. I need to understand this better. And so that would be a way to have a small bit of vulnerability and then listen.
Love that. Thank you, Darren, so much for sharing all your insights of all of your, more than 25 years of experience and knowledge with us today.
My pleasure. My aspiration is to make the world a better place, and you're helping me do that.
Thank you. And you're helping me as well on my mission that we learn every day, we share, we learn something new, we grow. And by growing our own businesses, I believe we are helping others as well. So thank you everyone for listening. As always, please share this episode with at least one more entrepreneur that can benefit from it. Leave comments. What else would you like to hear about and learn more so we can help you? Give us some likes and hearts. And as always, I see you in the next episode.